Welcome to At Issue. I'm H. Wayne Wilson. Thank you so much for joining us for a discussion about the Illinois River, but more particularly Peoria Lakes, because the lakes have provided habitat and sustenance for humans for some 12,000 years. But in the last 150 years, the urbanization has caused sedimentation, it's had a decline in water quality, and we now have a problem on Peoria Lakes. We are going to have a discussion about that problem and a potential solution with three individuals heavily involved in that particular issue, and Eric Miller is here. Eric is the Executive Director of the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, H. It's good to be here.
Steve Van Winkle is here. Some of you remember him as the Public Works Director for the City of Peoria, but he's been retired, kind of, because he's now the chair of the Peoria Lakes Basin Alliance. And we're going to discuss what that is and why that's so important. And on the board of that same organization, the PLBA, Peoria Lakes Basin Alliance, is Russ Crawford. Thank you all for being here. Let's start with Russ, because before we talk about a solution, we probably ought to identify the problem for Peoria Lakes.
Well, it's challenging because other than maybe bacteria and sedimentation, we're doing fine. But other than that, Mrs. Lincoln, how was the play? So we have focused on mostly sedimentation issues, and what people don't realize is when they drive across the bridge and they look out over that vast expanse, either bridge, but particularly the McCluggage Bridge, where they see the Peoria Lakes. It's so wide and beautiful and the sun shines. They think, what's the problem? Why are these people having meetings and talking about this stuff? And certainly, why does it affect maybe my taxes? What they don't realize is we're down to 18 inches in some spots that are really bad, and maybe 3 feet, which is a third of what the historic depth was. And we have had some projects like the island that has created some deep water habitat. And we know we can't bring the whole lake back to deep water, but part of the plan is to bring appropriate pockets back so that it adds for habitat and species and greater fish, etc.
There have been discussions all along. The Heartland Water Resources Council for years has suggested we need to do this, we need to do that. There have been other organizations that have come up with plans. Why have we not had more progress in solving this problem? Eric?
Well, I think we talked earlier about the silos that we all face. People have their own individual plans about what the river should be and could be, yet we really don't have consensus on the issue. It's important, in government these days with limited resources, limited dollars available to do anything, to achieve 100%, or not 100% consensus, but have a consensus on any one project. That's what the federal funding partners are looking for. They don't want to spend a lot of money and then read about criticism in the paper the next day or over the next few months. So that's what our plan is focused on, is achieving that consensus, bringing all those stakeholders to the table and talking about what their goals are.
Eric mentions money, Steve. Why is it that you believe that this particular effort, and we're going to talk more about this effort in just a moment, but why is this more feasible than past efforts?
Well, in the past, the Corps of Engineers' focus has been primarily to keep the barges moving and therefore keep the channel deep enough so that the barges can move up and down the river, utilizing the wickets or the dam as a means by which to control the water level. The Nature Conservancy, which is one of the members of the Peoria Lakes Basin Alliance, was very focused on what could they do to support the habitat within the river, not only the fish, but also the growing vegetation material that's in the river that's oftentimes being blotted out by the siltation. Then you have the Heartland Water Resource Council that's focusing on what can we do to make the lakes especially more attractive for land development along the edges of the river, and how can we keep the properties next to the river accessible by boat so that the people can use the river. And then you have the Tri-County Planning Commission that is kind of the umbrella of all this, not necessarily focused on any one thing, but trying to figure out a way to find a place for itself within the framework of all these things. This plan that we're now bringing forward, I think, is the first time when we've actually been able to bring the local interests and the Corps together in an effort to try to come up with something that they can all support.
And the Corps is important because they bring the possibility of some financing?
Absolutely. You don't do any construction project in the river without the Army Corps' approval. And so the Corps' involvement in this project is crucial. And they have authority to spend money on certain smaller projects that if we don't identify them, they're never going to be available to the Peoria area. So that's kind of a side goal in this whole project, in this whole effort, is to identify some of those smaller projects that can get funded rather quickly, that it's going to contribute to the overall success of the whole river.
One of the projects that has already occurred is the building of an island up by the McCluggage Bridge. Why was that island put in place?
We were the Peoria Lakes Basin Alliance was the local partner with the state IDNR and the Army Corps of Engineers on creating that island. And the reason we did it was, the technical reason that Congress approved it was simply for deepwater habitat. But the truth is, even the Army Corps has recognized now what we were all saying, and that is that it was for deepwater habitat, it was to remove sedimentation, it was to create habitat for fish and for wildlife. The deepwater habitat allows for not only increased fish, but increased species of fish. Some species don't go in shallow water. So it's all good. And I know some people, some of the viewers probably saw when that was getting built, and even after we finished, sometimes they'd drive by and there was no island there because the water would raise and it was submerged. And everybody would say, gee, did our island, all that money and time and effort go get washed away? It didn't. As the waters receded, there was our beautiful island. One other thing about that island, and that is, you see all this lush green on this island. There wasn't one seed planted. That was all nutrients that were down on the bottom of the Illinois River. And when they dredged that up and put that would, with the sunshine and the air, formulated.
So let's talk about what might be in this plan, because there isn't a solid plan right now, as I understand it. The agreement between the Army Corps and PLBA was signed in April to study Peoria Lakes. And then you have until next spring in order to come up with a plan. I want to talk about the public's involvement in a minute, but first, what kinds of things might be involved in this?
Yeah, I would say over the years there's been a lot of different types of projects proposed for the river, including backwater restoration, creating wetlands, some dredging sorts of things. Obviously the islands. We talked about a secondary channel at one point in time. So those are the sorts of things that we hope to come out of this. There may be other ideas that the public will have that, hey, I've got a great idea. I've seen this in a place where I used to live. Perhaps that's an idea that we could pursue. But it's coming up with these smaller projects that are going to make the larger plan. And we hope the public will come out, not only the professional public, the people that work for the state agencies and the municipalities and counties in the region, but just average everyday citizens that have an interest in contributing to the restoration of the river.
Steve, when Eric talks about smaller projects, I sense that this isn't one great big stamp and that's the solution to Peoria Lakes, but it's a symbiotic relationship between a lot of small steps forward that will actually benefit the lake as a whole.
Yes, I see it as just the first step, hopefully, to get not only the various stakeholders together on what we should be doing with Peoria Lakes, but also getting the public to better understand some of the problems that are out there. But I think we all can recognize that unless we could absolutely remove and transport the material that's coming out of the Peoria Lakes and other areas of the river at an expense that would be covered by the value of the material, and we've not been able to get to that point at this point, even though we've tried to do that, that ultimately the lakes are going to end up having to be different than they are today. There's going to have to be places where there are wetlands, there's going to be places where there's deep water, and there'll be islands and so forth. I think that this study will take us the first step toward coming up with a concept or an idea of what Peoria Lake should look like 15 or 20 years from now in a managed fashion.
And the public's input can come at several different steps along the way?
Yes, and we've tried to make this multimodal, multi-methodological, so that almost, whether it's Facebook for young folks or the internet or TV, or we've got a lot of young people at Tri-County now who are working on this project, who come up with these creative ideas. It's not just us guys here working on that. And it's a real effort to get everybody at the table. We have a thing we've created called the Project Review Committee, and they have authority to really sort of guide this along with the PLBA and the staff. We have put people on there from all regions. In fact, we keep going over it about every meeting to make sure who do we need for critical success that we haven't put on here yet. And there's that balance that it's up to about 18 or 19 people. We don't want it too great because they've got to make decisions. On the other hand, we need to make sure that somebody is not left out, because as you mentioned earlier, when you had the leader of Heartland and the leader of the Army Corps, or at least our regional leader, sort of arguing with each other, I think it's because they both felt they were left out, that they weren't part of a larger group and could share resolve their differences in a better way.
But for the general public, they'll have a chance real soon to have some initial input.
Yes. In fact, on July 13th, we're having this open house, and this open house will be an opportunity from 2 to 4 and from 6 to 8, I think the times. And there'll be about a 10 or 15 minute presentation in each of those segments. But then the rest of the time, they'll be able to sort of meander around to different stations, sort of like they do at an IDOT public hearing. And not only have people answer all their questions, but materials and various stations that some of our young folks have created to really engage them and to get their input and to record it. And so we're going to document all that. I've never been involved with greater ascertainment or a listening project as we're going to do with this thing to try to get it right.
Eric, July 13th, 2 to 4, 6 to 8, but where is it at?
It's going to be held at the Ivy Club on Galena Road in Peoria.
Okay.
Actually, it's Peoria Heights.
Peoria Heights, excuse me.
That's right.
Don't want to slight anyone.
So you're going to get public input, and what's the schedule after that?
Well, the schedule after that, obviously, we'll kind of gather that input, document it, put it into a form where we can review it, eliminate things that are what we call out of scope, and put it in front of the PLBA committees and perhaps eventually this project review committee to talk about the validity of these potential ideas. The Corps will also review those ideas, and perhaps it's an idea they've thought of, it may be a new idea to them. Ideally, the thought is to put some costs to projects or just these smaller projects, and then eventually if they have merit, they'll get prioritized, and that will become the basis of this plan. But it won't be done just that. It'll go back before the public. It'll be reviewed with what we call our stakeholder groups and our project review committees. So there'll be plenty of opportunity for not only the professional people to look at it, but the public people to look at it again to make sure that their ideas were recorded correctly, or maybe they would have some more input to them.
And once this plan is finalized, what happens next? And money's going to be part of your answer.
Absolutely. Funding is key in this day and age with government. We have a lack of resources and we have plenty of demands for it. But it's been my experience, if the project is not in a plan, a well vetted and there has consensus behind the plan, it's never going to get funded. It's going to just languish out there on the shelf. So again, our plan is several small projects that add up to a very large project, and we're going to try by any means possible to get resources allocated to those projects either at the federal or state level.
And this is a step-by-step, an incremental approach over a long period of time.
It is not only for the local area, but also for the state, and actually, if you look at it at a broader scope, even for the federal government through the Corps or through the EPA, because we can't solve the problems in Peoria Lakes by ourselves, because only 40% of the silt comes into the lakes from our local area. A small percentage of the contaminants within the river that causes the water quality to be lower than we would like it to be, or not even safe to be around, does not come from the local area, but comes from areas that the water flows from. So therefore we need to somehow get the state and the federal government to broaden their scope on what their goals are with respect to their prospective identities. With the Corps, of course, it's been focused primarily on transportation. Now we begin to see them reach out a little bit. They're now building islands. They're doing some things that are really outside of their norm. DNR and Illinois need to recognize that our problems in Peoria are the same problems that they have throughout the Illinois River, all the way from one end to the other. And perhaps this could be a catalyst to try to get the bigger picture in focus.
Eric, is one of the reasons the Army Corps is now coming to the table with more interest than in the past, because this might be a model for other areas?
That's what we believe. When we were up in the Rock Island area having the signing ceremony with the Corps, they indicated that this is a new process for them, and they'd like to, if successful, they'd like to recreate this process. Before the Corps the Corps has been a very large organization that is very structured, and obviously public input's important to them, but being proactive in that public input, it may be something that was foreign to them. And as planners, our whole careers are based off of engaging the public in an active manner. So that's the method that we would like to try in this instance, and bring consensus to a set of projects.
Russ, there are 11 tasks that have been identified in the overall plan, and one of them is to develop conservation alternatives. Does this plan, when it's finished, does it reach beyond Peoria Lakes, or is that going to be in the hands of someone else? In other words, is it going to reach up onto the bluffs, the ravines, the agricultural fields, etc.?
Yes, it will. Right now, it's not in our scope because of Peoria Lakes is sort of the geographic footprint that's in our scope. However, it's like if Doug Blodgett were here, and I think he'll be here at a later meeting for us, he would talk about the systemic relationship. And you can't really get to where you need to get to in the Peoria Lakes or the Illinois River Basin, our section of it, unless you address the uplands and the tributaries and the streams that impact it. So those will have to be a part of it. The good news is Steve indicated that because of that expansion, you're going to have more stakeholders, you're going to have more, the state or the federal government would say, gee, we can get more bang for our buck because this is a problem that just doesn't exist right here in the Peoria Lakes, and it's over. We've got replication opportunities, and we've discussed with them the replication of projects and the funding sources that may or may not be available for some of those. I've been working with the Corps for 40 years, and I've never heard them sit down at a meeting and talk about other pockets of money that they have available to help with some of these things. I mean, I'm getting goosebumps right now talking about it, because everybody, of course, that has money doesn't want to talk about spending. But this is an important thing for them. It's not that they're trying to throw money away. It's an important problem that they've had for a long time, and they just want to make sure that we as the locals engage as many folks as possible to get their input before we move forward, so they can be assured of collaboration and consensus.
The reference to Doug Blodgett earlier, he is with the Nature Conservancy. I want to follow up on this, Steve, because you can't solve Peoria Lakes, even if you had a solution. You said, okay, we've improved the water quality, we've removed some sedimentation, we created some islands, some deep water, some wetland, some backwaters. If we keep putting chemicals, effluents, if we keep putting sedimentation back into the lake from these other areas, so what assurance can we have that this effort is not an isolated effort?
I wish I could say there was assurance. I think that the only thing that this project could do would be to make more people aware of the fact that this problem exists, and that in order to solve the problem, you have to look at it holistically rather than one piece or one part of the river at a time. And collectively, through our representatives at the state level and the federal level, hopefully we can get, even though I'm not in favor of a lot of regulations, perhaps we could get some laws passed that would allow government to have better control over these kinds of things throughout the tributary system that we have within that feeds the Illinois River, versus just the municipalities that they have some control over now that happen to border parts of the Illinois River. An example being combined sewer outfalls in Peoria, and the fact that the federal government does have control over that entity with regulations that would force municipalities like Peoria and East Peoria and so forth to spend a lot of money to try to limit the number of times that the combined sewer flow directly into the Illinois River, and combined meaning sanitary sewer as well as stormwater. The problem, of course, with that is that even though if you solve that problem, many more times a year the water is not safe to contact by humans because of the same kind of material, E. coli and fecal coliform, that are coming into the river by virtue of animal type of lots and other
CAFOs.
Yes, that occur
confined animal
up and down the river that flow through. So maybe 50 times a year we will have the water contaminated to the point where you can't have contact, and there's signs out that would say that that's the case. And only 10 times are we trying to solve a problem with the CSO that could cost $300 million. So somehow or other we have to bring these two together, because it doesn't make a lot of sense to solve the $300 million problem when you have a more frequent problem with the other sources of the contamination.
I agree with Steve, but I'd like to add in the answer to your question, sustainability. This group, our PLBA, has identified sustainability as a critical component for exactly the reason you pointed out. We didn't want to spend time and effort and money and get the public all excited and then even make some positive change, and then have it just wash away or roll back. That would be worse probably than not having the change. So what we're doing is engaging both the subject matter experts, the people at the Corps, also all the locals, in trying to address that element of sustainability so that we can not only do something good, but we can keep it good after we do it.
A final thought, and you mentioned second channel, and we kind of let it drop. What do you mean by second channel? And be very brief.
Yes, secondary channel is a concept that was introduced in the late 80s to remove sediment near the shoreline of the lower Peoria Lake to form what we call a secondary channel, and perhaps use the material that was dredged to build islands that, there would be islands as well as some additional deep water habitat.
And that secondary channel would be along the east side of the lakes, because the channel that provides transportation for the Corps is along the west side. And so the real problem as far as access for property owners that abut the Illinois River is more so on the east side than the west, because it's so far away from the channel.
And that's why island placement becomes critical in developing a secondary channel, because if you have that island out of alignment, it destroys the whole idea.
We'll see what it comes to. We'll talk about this again on that issue when a plan is developed after the first of the year. I thank you all for being here.
Thank
Eric
you.
Miller of the Tri-County Regional Planning Commission, and Russ Crawford of the Peoria Lakes Basin Alliance, and Steve Van Winkle, who's chair of the Peoria Lakes Basin Alliance. Thank you for
you for
joining
the
us on
opportunity.
At Issue. Next week, join us again for another edition of At Issue, when we'll talk with the mayor of Galesburg and the head of Knox County Economic Development. That's on the next At Issue.